Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws. Today we are starting part of 4, which is mostly on commerce, and looking at Book 20 today of the Spirit of the Laws, part 4, starting on commerce, and importance of trade, and today we're going to go to Book 20, which is on the laws in relation to commerce, considered its nature and its distinctions about commerce. What's so interesting about chapter 20 is that it starts out with, unlike other chapters, it doesn't mean to go to chapter 1. We get the invocation of the muse. Now, some editions remove this. Some editions put this at the beginning. This edition puts it where it was originally meant to be. It opens up with a line from Virgil, Aeneid, that which great Atlas taught. The idea is that metaphor of Aeneas, Virgil 1. Atlas is the great god, the Titan, who's holding the world up, right? Holding the world up. And that therefore, this is what the idea, the metaphor is what great Atlas taught commerce, right? And the invocation of the muses here. It starts out with this line. He starts out this invocation of the muse. Again, this is poetry by Montesquieu. There's a very good introduction about this by, come on now. I gotta drop my name, Claremont guy. My mind is going blank on this. I know. The African American Claremont guy, friend of, peer of, those of he wrote a very good chapter about this thing on the invocation of the muses. It's available. Bill Allen, W.B. Allen, has an art publication or thing about this. He translated even a translation of it. And I think it'd be worth looking at. And someone who's going to look more into this on its own would benefit from doing that. So let's look at the invocation of the muse. Now notice he breaks from tradition in doing this. In other words, Montesquieu does something new. He gives this long invocation here. Remember the muses. The muses are these demonia, not gods per se, but creatures created by gods that are divine, that inspire. Okay, the inspiring muses are things that inspire. So invocation of the muse. Now imagine as a muse being used for commerce. Virgins of the Praean Mound, do you hear the name I give you? Inspire me. I have run a long course. I am crushed by pain, fatigue, and worry. Give my spirit the calm and the gentleness that now flee from me, as you are never as divine as when you lead to wisdom and truth through pleasure. Right? Okay, this is invocation. He's exhausted. Maybe this is about him, the author, Montesquieu. This has been a long work. He's tiring. But it's also about commerce. We think about commerce, about trade and about thing, not a passion. But notice this, that wisdom leads wisdom and truth through pleasure. This is also the aspect of isn't this the whole point of somebody like Burden and Mandeville's idea of a fable of the bees, right? It is through pleasure that virtue emerges out through truth and beauty, wisdom and truth. But if you do not want to soften the harshness of my labors, conceal the labor itself. Make it so that I mediate, though I appear to feel. Meditate. Make it so that I mediate. Meditate. So meditate, though I appear to feel. Make it so that one is instructed through, though I do not teach, and that when I announce useful things, one believes that I knew nothing, and that you told me everything. So, in other words, he's basically saying, I'm going to present things, make it I'm going to mediate. Yeah, I meditate, though I feel these things, and make it so that one is instructed, though I do not teach, that when I announce useful things, one believes I knew nothing, and that you told me everything. In other words, I knew myself, not me. These wisdom come from the gods. When the waters of your spring comes forth from your beloved rock, they rise into the air, not to fall back again, but to flow over the meadow. They are your delight because they are the delight of the shepherds. Charming, in other words, the idea the water does not flow back into that; it goes over to the meadows and becomes the joy of delight of the shepherds. Right? And if you cast me but a single glance, everyone will read my works, and what is not intended as an amusement will be a pleasure. Divine Muse, I sense that you've inspired me, not just what is sung in tempe with the pipes, or what is repeated at Delos on the lyre, that you also want me to make reason speak. It is the noblest, the most perfect, and the most exquisite of our senses, reason, the noblest and most perfect and exquisite of our senses, reason and speak, reasoning. We have to be reasoning as a sense, right? So this invocation of the muse is the muse to guide him, to guide us in this Hawaiian discussion in the book on commerce. Interesting. Chapter 1, Commerce. The following material would require more extensive treatment, but the nature of this work does not permit it. So therefore, he's admitting this is not going to be. So therefore, this may be why he's inspiring the moves. That a work on commerce requires much more work he's able to do it, but the present treatise won't allow it. I should like to guide on a tranquil river. I'm dragged along by a torrent. Commerce cures destructive prejudices. And it is an almost general rule that everywhere there are gentle Moors, there is commerce. And that everywhere where there's commerce, there are gentle Moors. So therefore, in other words, commerce cures destructive prejudices, first of all. And the general rule that everywhere there's and it's almost a general rule that everywhere commerce is, there's going to be gentle Moors. And where there's gentle Moors, commerce. So this is the chicken or egg, right? This is this. Therefore, one should not be surprised if our Moors are less fierce than they were formerly. Commerce has spread knowledge of the Moors of all nations everywhere. They have been compared to each other, and good things have resulted from this. So commerce is both communication and trade. And the commerce information about Moors is spreading the Moors, spreading knowledge of the Moors. But then it spreads the exchange of Moors, and therefore with commerce and exchange, there becomes a knowledge of things, and it becomes people can therefore moderate and to change it and improve it. Right. This is what he said earlier, and other things. One can say that the laws of commerce perfect Moors for the same reason that these same laws ruin Moors. So these same laws, the laws of commerce, can ruin Moors. Commerce corrupt pure Moors, and this was the subject of Plato's complaint. It polishes and softens barbarous Moors, as we see every day. So there's a twofold thing. The Platonic complaint about commerce is that commerce and trade corrupts pure Moors. Pure Moors. The virtue, in other words, the argument here is that commerce is below what is the virtuous man, and it corrupts the virtuous man. It corrupts the pure Moors. But regarding barbarous Moors, horrible Moors, commerce makes these more gentle. So while it corrupts pure Moors, it soft polishes and makes more softens barbarous Moors. Okay, so therefore, this is the understanding of here. Therefore, the effects of commerce must be understood in terms of this problem. Um, okay, we have 23 chapters for this book, and this is going to be. Let's see how it goes. Chapter 2 on the spirit of commerce. The natural effects of commerce is to lead to peace. So commerce. This is liberal peace theory, right? This is Montesquieu presents the concept. Commerce leads to peace. Two nations that trade with each other become reciprocally dependent. If one has an interest in buying, the other has an interest in selling, and all unions are founded on mutual need. But if the spirit of commerce unites nation, it does not unite individuals in the same way. We see that in countries where one is affected only by the spirit of commerce, there is a traffic in all human activities and all moral virtues. The smallest things, those required by humanity, are done or given for money. So therefore, everything is done for all the human activities and all the moral virtues. The smallest things, those required by humanity, are done or given for money. Done for or given for money. The spirit of commerce produces in man a certain feeling for exact justice, opposed to one hand to banditry, opposed on the one hand to banditry. In other words, banditry was natural thing. In other words, Aristotle argued that natural commerce, banditry, was a form of natural commerce. Back book one, Baton, in chapter 7, I think, of book 1, where he talked about this in natural forms of acquisition. That commerce is not natural form of acquisition. It is emergence out of this different societies, different communities. It's a social emergent structure. Okay. Therefore, natural commerce is banditry. Banditry is natural acquisition. Commerce is a indirectly natural. It emerges out of our needs, and that's where money making, interest, and things like that are completely artificial, right? Are imaginary, arbitrary in that sense. But Montesquieu is saying commerce produces a need for exactly, right? Because as opposed to on one hand to banditry, and on the other to those moral virtues that make it so that one does not always discuss one's interest alone, that one can neglect them for those of others. So exact justice, right, opposed to the one hand banditry, and to those to the other of those moral virtues that make it so that one does not always discuss one's own interest alone, and that one can neglect them for those of others. These sacrifice. Okay, in other words, the idea of virtue in this conception of this. By contrast, total absence of commerce produces the banditry that Aristotle put among the ways of acquiring. Its spirit is not contrary to certain moral virtues. For example, hospitality, so rare among commercial countries, is notably built among bandit peoples. It is a sacrilege among the Germans, say Tacitus, to close one's house to any man, whether known or unknown. Anyone who has offered hospitality to a stranger will point him to another house where there is similar hospitality, and he will be received there with the same humanity. But after the Germans had founded kingdoms, hospitality became a burden to them. This is shown by two laws in the Code of the Burgundians. The one that imposes a penalty on any barbarian who would point a stranger to a house of a Roman, and the other rules that anyone who receives a stranger will be compensated by the inhabitants, each according to his share. So it's just the idea of the reductions of inhabitants. So in other words, banditry, but also banditry produces hospitality among barbarians. And then, therefore, commercial people, hospitality is not like it has to be paid for, commercial. And hence the example of here. Chapter 3 on the poverty of peoples. There are two sorts of poor peoples. Some are made so by the harshness of the government, and these people are capable of are capable of almost no virtue because their their poverty is a part of their servitude. So there's two types of poor people. One is the government makes them so, and therefore and they cannot capable of any virtue because their poverty is product of their servitude. The other are poor only because they have disdained or because they do not know the comforts of life. And these last can do great things because this poverty is part of their liberty. So therefore, this is poverty not because they're poor only because they have disdained or because they do not know the comforts of life. Disdain the qualities like, and they can do great things because their poverty is part of their liberty. Chapter 4, commerce in various governments. Commerce is related to the Constitution. In governments of one alone, it's ordinarily founded on luxury, and though it is also founded on real needs, its principal object is to procure for the nation engaged in it all that serves its arrogance, its delights, and its fancies. In government by many, it is more often founded on economy. Traders eyeing all the nations of the earth, take to one what they bring from another. This is how the republics of Tyre, Carthage, Basia, Florence, Venice, and Holland engaged in commerce. This kind of traffic concerns the government of many by its nature and its monarchical government on occasion. Therefore, this traffic concerns the government by its nature of many, and monarchical government because of an occasion. It's not due to the government of the many by its nature needs commerce in order to for its livelihood and its things. But monarchical government, no, it's an occasion. For as it is founded only on the practice of gaining little and even of gaining less than any other nation, and is being compensated only by gaining continually, it is scarcely possible for it to be done by people among whom luxury is established, who spends much, and who see only great objects. It is keeping with these ideas, as Cicero said so well. I do not like a people to be both the rulers and the clerks of the universe. Indeed, one would have to assume that each individual in this state, and even the whole state, always had a head full of both great projects and small ones, which is contradictory. In other words, they're clerks, rulers, and clerks, right? The clerks have small profits, small ambitions, and the rulers have great ambitions. So therefore, these things are contradictory in that sense. Yet the greatest enterprises are also undertaken in those states which subsist by economic commerce, and they show a daring not to be found in monarchies. Hence, here is the reason for it. One commerce leads to another, the small to a middling, the middling to a great, and he who early desired to gain little arrives at a position where he has no less of a desire to gain a great deal. Moreover, the great enterprises of traders are always necessarily mixed with public business, but the public business is for the most part as suspect to the merchants and monarchies as it appears safe to them in republican states. Therefore, great commercial enterprises are not for monarchies, but for the government of many. So, therefore, in monarchies, great enterprises scare the merchants get this. Oh no, it's going to be bad. But in Republic of the Many, that the commerce of both, in other words, commerce and the government of the many are much more allied to each other, and therefore the ambition of the commercial class becomes the ambition of the government of the many. In short, one belief in one's prosperity is more certain in these states, makes one undertake everything. And because one believes that what one has one has acquired is secure, one dares to expose it in order to acquire more. Only the means for acquisition are at risk. Now men expect much of their fortune. So therefore, in other words, of the government of the free states, the government of the many, in other words, their property is not as at risk. The argument goes, and monarchies also, they're not at risk, and therefore there is a once things are not at risk. In other words, they have safety in their property. Their property is not at risk. They're able to take risks with it, and that the risks and the rewards will be secured in this. So there are rules and laws and things. There's not an arbitrary power taking it, and deciding it, and being one day going to take it away from you. Okay. In other words, government of the many and monarchy both will have kind of a that people have secure in their property, it secures in their prosperity in that sense, and because of that, they are willing to take risks. Okay. What he says here, the acquired is secure, one dares to expose in order to acquire more. Only the means for acquisition are at risk now, right? Now men expect much of their fortune. I do not mean that any monarchies are totally excluded from economic commerce, but they are less inclined to it by nature. I do not mean that republics we know are entirely without the commerce of luxury, but it is less related to their constitution. Okay, so therefore it's not that in other words, he's saying that monarchies is less likely to do it, and there are going to be monarchies that will engage in commerce, economic commerce, but they're less inclined to do it. Okay, but republics are not going to be. They're going to be republics that are not without the commerce of luxury, but it is less related to their constitution. As for despotic states, it's useless to talk about it. General rule: in a nation that is servile, one works more to preserve than to acquire. In a free nation, one works more to acquire than to preserve. So his idea, in a servile state, in a despotic and servile situation, one is required to acquire to maintain. It required to one wishes to preserve what one wants to preserve, keep what you have, not get more because it's. Whereas in a free state, one works more to acquire. Right? Chapter 5, on peoples who have engaged in economic commerce. Marseillaise, a necessary retreat in the midst of a stormy sea, Marseillaise, where all the winds and shoals and coastline order ships to put in, was frequented by seafaring people. The barrenness of its territory made its citizens decide on economic commerce. They had to be hardworking in order to replace what nature refused them, just in order to live among the barbarian nations that were to make their prosperity moderate, in order for their government always to be tranquil. Finally, frugal Moors, in order to live always by the commerce that they would the more surely preserve, the less it was advantageous to them. Okay, so they preserve the less it was more preserved. It has been seen everywhere that violence and harassment has brought forth economic commerce among men who are constrained to hide in marshes, on islands, and on shoals, and even on dangerous reef. Thus were Tyre, Venice, and the Dutchmen founded. Fugitives found scarcity there. They had to live. They drew their livelihood from the whole universe, or all of commerce. So that's why commerce emerges places where it was the place to hide, the place was safe, that powerful, and things could not come. This is the metaphor there that he's talking about. Chapter 6. Some effects of a great navigation. It sometimes happens that a nation that engages in economic commerce, needing the commodities of one country to serve as the basis of procuring the commodities of another, is satisfied to gain very little and sometimes nothing from the former, in the expectation or the certainty of gaining much on the latter. Thus, when Holland almost alone traded with the south of Europe to the north into French wines, which carried to the north, it in a way, served it only as the base for its commerce in the north. It is known that in Holland, certain kinds of commodities imported from distance often sell for no more than what they cost where they come from. Here is the reason given. A captain who needs ballast for a ship will take on marble. He needs wood for packing his cargo. He will buy it, and provided he loses nothing on it, he will believe he has done well. Thus Holland also has its quarries and its forests, right? That's why it sells at the same price in that sense. Not only can a commerce that produce nothing but be useful, but it can even, but so can even a disadvantaged commerce. So wait a minute, this is even a disadvantaged commerce can bring a benefit. Right? I have heard that in Holland, whale hunting, generally speaking, almost never returns what it costs. But those who have been employed in building the ships, those who have provided the rigging, the gears, and the provisions are also those who take the principal interest in the hunt. Even if they lose on the hunt, they have come out ahead on the equipment. This commerce is a kind of lottery, and each one is secluded by the hopes of a lucky number. Everyone loves to play, and most sober people willingly enter the play when it does not have the appearance of gambling, with all its irregularities, its violence and dispositions, the loss of time, and even life. So, therefore, this is the idea. This looks like it is like a kind of gambling. I'm hunting the whale, but I built things to go hunting. You have to do this, but these things also have benefit to other people. So, therefore, yes, the whale hunting is at a loss, but all the things that produce the whale, make the whale hunting possible, makes money, and therefore provides for means. So, therefore, the real reason why the thing that's being done for is not, but then the things made in order to do that are able to be more valuable for other purposes, and therefore that's where the profit is made. So you're doing it for the profit is not from doing from this; it is by providing the means to do that. But that is not profitable. But those things that make this possible are profitable. Okay. This is the idea of the complexity of these relations, that it may not be direct, the real reason may not be the cause of the thing, but rather secondary and tertiary and higher level activities which make this possible may be the source of the wealth and the value. Chapter 7, the spirit of England concerning commerce, right? Almost none of England's tariffs with other nations are regular. Tariffs change, so to speak, with each parliament, as it lifts or imposes particular duties. England has also wanted to preserve its independence in this matter. Sovereignly jealous of the commerce that is done there, it blinds itself with few treaties and depends only on its laws. Right? It doesn't like treaties, laws, like jealous of its commerce. Other nations have made commercial interests give way to political interests. England has always made its political interests give way to the interests of commerce. So therefore, the English always give way to its interests of commerce. This is the people of the world who have best known how to take advantage of each of these three great things at the same time: religion, commerce, and liberty. Right? This is the three things. The English are able to religion, liberty, and commerce. Now, commerce is in the middle. Commerce is the theme of this section. If liberty was the theme of the previous sections, right? And particularly back in chapter 11, book 11, chapter 6, the famous discussion of liberty. Right? So that was all the way, and yeah, that's part two, right? That was in part two. Uh, and yeah, the middle book of part two, right? Which dealt with in the chapter, sixth chapter, very early, that long set, that huge chapter on England, right? Countries and power. And then we had the next longest chapter on that at the end of at the end of book 19, right? Chapter 27, which again was on England, right? So, okay, this is the idea. Other nations have made commerce interest give way to political interest. England has always made its political interest give way to the interest of its commerce. This is, again, this is that point. This is the people in the world who have best known how to take advantage of each of the three great things at the same time: religion, never talked, commerce, and liberty. So notice that the middle point, commerce, is the theme of where now. Religion first, liberty is last. Right? Chapter 8, how economic commerce has sometimes been hampered. So how commerce has been hampered. In certain monarchies, laws have been made which serve to lower the states that engage in economic commerce. In other words, to lower the states that engage in economic commerce. They have been forbidden to supply commodities other than those produced in their country. They have been permitted to trade only with ships built in their own country. There's a restraint. So they can only sell commodities that are produced by their country and economy, trade with ships built by the country. The state imposing these laws must be able to engage in commerce easily itself. Otherwise, it would do itself at least an equal wrong. So in other words, it must be better in that sense. The states imposing these laws must be able to engage in commerce easily. Otherwise, it would be harmful to them. It would be better to deal with a nation that requires little, and that the needs of commerce renders somewhat dependent, with a nation that knows where to place all superfluous commodities due to the breadth of its views or its business. That is rich and can itself take many products. That will pay promptly for them. That has, so to speak, a necessity for being faithful. That is peaceful in principle. That seeks to gain and not to conquer. It is better, I say, to deal with this nation than to deal with others that are ever rivals and would not offer all these advantages. So therefore, in other words, this is the better situation. That is what they're superfluous. They can buy things that keep their trust, prompt their pay. They have necessities for being faithful. That is peaceful in principle. That they seek to gain, not through conquest. This is the better nation to trade with in that sense, with trust with. And I think this is a warning about China, right? Someone didn't read this chapter, and they talk about China. Okay? Chapter 9, on exclusion in commerce. The one true maxim is to exclude no nation from one's commerce without great reasons. You need reason. You should not exchange for commerce without great reason. The Japanese trade with only two nations, the Chinese and the Dutch. The Chinese earn 1,000% on sugar and sometimes as much on return commodities. The Dutch make almost the same profit. Any nation that is guided by the maxims of the Japanese will necessarily be deceived. It is competition. It is competition that puts a just price on goods and establish true relations between them. So therefore, this is the problem. The Japanese is not a good model. This is only true. The just price is based on competition of goods, right? This is the idea. Still less should a state subject itself to selling its commodities to but a single nation on the pretext that it will take all of it at a certain price. For their grain, the Poles made this bargain with the towns of Danzig. Many kings of the Indies have made similar contracts with the Dutch for spices. These agreements are appropriate only for a poor nation, which willingly abandons the expectation of becoming rich, provided it has secured sustenance, or for nations whose servitude consists in renouncing the use of the things nature has given them, or in using the things to engage in a disadvantaged commerce. Okay, so therefore this is This is the idea that they're not getting. It's not they're poor. They can't do it. They need to do this for some reason, or that they're, as he says, the poor nation which has willingly abandoned its expectation of becoming rich, right? Provided it has secured its sustenance. In other words, it's not the society survive. Or for nations whose servitude consists of renouncing the useful things that nature has given them, or in using these things to engage in a disadvantaged commerce. So in other words, they use it wrongly, bad for good. Chapter 10, establishment proper to economic commerce. In states that engage in economic commerce, one has fortunately established banks. Which, by the means of their credit, have formed a new sign of values. But it would be wrong to introduce them into states that carry on a commerce of luxury. So therefore, banks and commerce of luxury. To put them into countries governed by one alone is to assume silver on the one side and power on the other. That is, on the one side, the faculty of having everything without any power, and on the other, power with the faculty of having nothing at all. In such a government, there has never been anyone but the prince who has obtained or has ever been able to obtain a treasury. And wherever there's a treasury, as soon as it's successful, immediately becomes the prince's. So therefore, you don't want this idea of despotic states or one alone. For the same reason, trading companies, and remember, the absolute states is luxury. So luxury tends to lead to what? The despotic rule. This is the danger thing about this. For the same reason, trading companies that associate for the sake of a certain commerce that are rarely suited for the government of one alone. In other words, commerce for a suited subject is not rarely suited for government. The nature of these companies is to give to individual wealth the force of public wealth. But in these states, this force can be found only in the hands of the prince. I would go further. Trading companies do not always suit states where there is economic commerce. And if business is not so large as to be beyond the reach of the individual, it is better not to hamper the liberty of commerce by exclusive privileges. So this idea of privileges, that trading houses that have privileges and things like this, it's liberty of commerce. Maybe better not to have these specific trading things. Because I will go further, but in these states where this force can be found only in the hands of the prince, right? Because I would go further. Trading companies do not always suit states where there is economic commerce. So trading companies, in this sense, right? That why? Because they're usually done to deal with less developed and more monarchical structures, right? Because if the business is not so large as to be beyond the reach of individuals, it is better not to hamper the liberty of commerce by exclusive privileges so that everyone can do it. You can't want these contracts would only give privileges to do these one big firms. Therefore, this would lead to kind of denying people their right to do things. This is kind of like the radical argument against why giving monopolies. We shouldn't give monopolies because why the larger people, the people are going to get access to this. Or this is the argument against Walmart and government contracts and government privileging to big businesses, because the private individuals could do it, but smaller firms can do it, and therefore this is not these smaller firms are able to do this. Oh yes, the bigger firm may be more efficient, but well that means all these people are going to lose their opportunities and livelihoods and things like this. So there's a weird aspect. This is counter the libertarian argument of commerce. Chapter 11, continuation of the same subject. In states that engage in economic commerce, one can establish a free pool. The economy of the state, which always follows the frugality of individuals, gives its economic commerce a soul, so to speak. What it loses in taxes by the establishment considered here is offset by what it can draw from the republic in wealth made by industriousness. So, in other words, where it loses in taxes. In other words, it creates a free port. Free port allows, in other words, it allows for guillotine, things like this. So it loses money from the revenue of the free port, right? But what it loses from the taxes, the money that it loses the taxes by the free port, it gains in the industriousness. All the people are working harder, making more money, and therefore you're getting more of this wealth in your society, and you're benefiting from that. In a monarchism, such establishment would be contrary to reason. So that is in a monarchism, such as establishment would be contrary to reason. Their only effect would be to relieve luxury of the weight of impulse. It would deprive itself of the sole good this luxury can procure, and of the only bridle that in such a constitution it can have. So therefore, in other words, in monarch governments, you need to have this regulatory entity to regulate ports, control it. Why? Because what's happening is if you get free ports, and luxury will come in, and luxury will destroy, will ultimately be the engine of destruction of the monarchy, the moderateness of the monarchy. Chapter 12 of Liberty of Commerce. Liberty of commerce is not a faculty granted to traders to do what they want. So this is not about traders doing what they want. This would be instead be the servitude of commerce. Right? Traders, businesses doing what they want. That's servitude. What hampers that which hampers those who engage in commerce does not, for all that, hamper commerce. So things that you think that engage in commerce, things that hamper those who engage in commerce, does not, for all that, hamper commerce. That it is countries of liberty that the traders find innumerable obstacles. The laws never thwart him less than in countries of servitude. England prohibits the export of its wool. It wants coal brought to the capital by sea. It does not permit the exports of horses except they are gelded. The ships from its colonies that trade in Europe are to anchor in England. It hampers the trader, but it does so in the favor of commerce. So it hampers traders and business, but it does to ensure commerce. Right? Chapter 13, what destroys that liberty? Where there is commerce, there are custom houses. The object of commerce is to export and import commodities in favor of the state, and the object of the customs house is a certain duty on the same exporting that also favors the state. Therefore, the state must be neutral between its custom houses and its commerce, and must arrange that these two things never thwart one another. And then one enjoys the liberty of commerce there. So you have to make sure that you need commerce house to get the money from it, but you need the commerce to get the money. So therefore, the commerce houses need to not destroy the commerce, because if the commerce house is destroyed, over-regulate and make commerce not, it loses the money, and that the state does not benefit, right? So therefore, the farming of customs destroys commerce, in that that by its injustices and harassments, and by the excesses of what it imposts. But independently of that, it also destroys it further by the difficulties to which it gives rise and the formality it requires. So the custom houses and farming it, but you farm out the custom houses for people to make profit from. And then they will do it, and then they will start making money from taxes and revenue. Therefore, they will impose restrictions on commerce, and therefore kill the commerce to do it. And it also creates injustices and harassments, right? And it gives also formalities. In England, where the customs are directly imposed directly, there is a singular ease in trade. So there's direct customs. It's singularly done. So therefore, it's direct to trade. And a word in writing accomplishes the greatest business. The merchant does not have to waste an infinite time and have specified agents in order to conclude all the different difficulties brought up by the tax farmers or to submit to them. So that way you get this tax farmer to go to get paperwork and do things like this. There was all the people who have the regulatory to give you a tax stamp or a fee to do this. This makes it very difficult to do business. It's central England. It's the custom house is centralized. It's out there by the state. And therefore, what happens is there's only one thing. It's quick, easy way, right? And swift. Chapter 14 on on the laws of commerce that entail the confiscation of commodities, right? The Magna Carta of England forbid, in the event of war, the seizure and confiscations of commodities from traders, except as a reprisal. It is a fine thing for the English nation to have made this one of the articles of its liberty. In the war Spain waged against England in 1740, a law was made that punished with death those who introduced English commodities into Spanish states. It imposed this same penalty on those who carried Spanish commodities in the England states. Such an ordinance can find, I believe, no other mode than that of the laws of Japan. So again, Japan is the despotic thing. This English law, this against that. It runs counter to our Moors, the English Moors. It was counter to their Moors, to the spirit of commerce, and to the harmony that should prevail in promoting penalties. It confuses all ideas, making a state crime of what is only a violation of the police and its rules and regulation of Moors and things of this. Chapter 15 of corporal constraints of the body. Solon ordered that there would no longer be corporal obligations for civil debts, only being the bodies, right? In Athens, he drew this. He drew this from Egypt. Warkarus had made it, and Syracuse had revived it. This law is good for ordinary civil business, but we are right not to observe it in commercial. But we are right not to observe it in commercial business, for traders are obliged to entrust great sums of often quite sums for often quite short periods of time, to give them and take them back again. The debtor must fulfill his arrangement at the appointed time, and this assumes corporal constraint. In business deriving from ordinary civil contracts, the law should not provide for corporal constraints. In other words, civil contracts, right? Ordinary civil contracts. The law should not provide corporal constraints because it makes more of the liberty of one citizen than of the convenience of another. But in agreements that derive from commerce, law should make more of public conveniences. The law should make more of the public conveniences than of the liberty of a citizen. This does not prevent the restrictions and limitations that humanity and good police can require. So in other words, this is a limitation. He's saying that there needs to be bodily constraints. Bodily, you have to tie to it. Private commerce, because of the debts and like this and the cheating of this. But again, at the same time, that the public good has to be maintained in this sense. So, but in agreements that derive from commerce, the law should make more a public convenience than of the liberty of a citizen. So therefore, the convenience, the good of this, the good of the system, the good of the benefit. So we're going to might sacrifice an aspect of individual liberty for the public convenience. But this does not prevent restrictions and limitations that humanity and good police require. So we're not going to beat people up, not going to physically torture them. Okay, there's going to be restrictions on this, but you're going to be held accountable. Chapter 16, a fine law. The laws of Geneva that exclude from magistrates and even from entry into the great council the children of those who have lived or who have died insolvent, unless the children discharge their father's debts, is a very good one. The debts of the Geneva idea that it has the effect of building up trust in traders and magistrates and the cities itself. Here again, confidence in an individual has the force of public confidence. So this is really interesting. He says this is a fine law. The children are to be held accountable for the obligations of the parent. Okay, that's very interesting law doctrine. This is where Montesquieu comes across as more of the economic liberal in a sense. It doesn't understand that maybe that's not a good idea. Chapter 17, they find a law of roads. The Rhodesians went further. Sextus Empiricus says that their son could not be excused from paying his father's debt by renouncing his inheritance. Therefore, you couldn't renounce your inheritance; you're still obligated. This law of Rhodes was given to a republic founded on commerce. Now, I believe the reason drawn from commerce itself should have set this limitation, that the debts contracted by the father after his son had begun to carry on commerce would not affect the goods acquired by the son. So therefore, in other words, a merchant should always know his obligation and conduct himself at every moment in accordance with the state of his fortune. So therefore, in other words, once I've done independently, my father has done something like this, and his debts then, wait a minute, how can I don't know, I don't control his debts. I'm not inheriting his wealth from him. So therefore, this idea like this, that couldn't denounce it by not renouncing the inheritance. Well, no. This is a good law, but then even he says there's a problem to it. So, okay. Chapter 18 on judges for commerce. Xenophon, in his book Ways and Means, wanted one to reward those prefects of commerce who dispatched proceedings most quickly. In other words, he wanted to give rewards to people who dealt more quickly. He felt the need for our commercial jurisdiction. There was this idea that effective commercial jurisdiction. Commercial business is only slightly susceptible to formalities. The more formalities and more regulations and more procedures you do, it makes commerce difficult, and it raises risk and it raises costs, and therefore it hurts profit. Right? The action of one day have to be founded foul the next day by others of the same nature. Therefore, they must be decided every day. And it is otherwise in the actions of life that have much influence on the future, but which happen rarely. So one usually marries only once. One does not make bequests or testaments every day. One comes of age only. So the big, real important things happen rarely. But commerce is every day. It's an everyday can happen. Therefore, it's not as important, not as significant. But this is why you can't have those restraints. But the big ones, you need more time to think about it. So mega things. Plato says that in a town where there's no maritime commerce, half the number of civil laws are needed. And this is very true. Commerce brings into a country different sort of people, a great number of agreements, kinds of goods, and ways of acquisition. Thus, in a commercial town, there are fewer judges and more law. Thus, in a commercial town, there are fewer judges and more laws. So, in a commercial town, there are fewer judges and more laws. So, therefore, this idea that laws become regulations, habits, kinds of good acquisitions, and that's to regulate it. Chapter 19, that the prince should not engage in commerce. Theophilus, seeing a ship which carried commodities for his wife Theodora, had it burned. I'm the emperor, he told her, and you make me to be a shipmaster. How can the poor people earn a living if we too ply their trade? He could have added, who will restrain us if we make our monopolies? Who will require us to fulfill our engagements? The courtiers will want to do our commerce. They will be more avid and more unjust than we. The people have trust in our justice. They have none in our opulence. The many imposts that make their misery are certain proofs of our own misery. So therefore, this idea the prince should not do this. The prince should not engage in this. The people should engage in it like this, because once the prince get involved, then what's going to happen is that the people won't benefit. It becomes despotic in that sense. Chapter 20. When the Portuguese and the Castilian dominated the East Indies, commerce had such rich branches that their princes did not fail to seize them. This ruined the establishment of those parts. The Viceroy of Goya it granted exclusive privilege to individuals. One has no trust in such people. Commerce is interrupted by perpetual change of those to whom it is entrusted. No one manages this commerce, or is concerned that one leaves only ruin to one heirs. The profit stays in the hands of the individuals and is not spread out enough. So therefore, this is it's the danger of this is that you give this to people in powerful people take it, and they destroy the commerce, they destroy the benefits that are done from this, and go that privileges like this, the commerce becomes too arbitrary. Remember, the real benefit is not always the direct benefit; it's also the tertiary and secondary benefits that emerge and the activities and profits from this. And once the those are takeable and lost, the incentives to do things are lost, and therefore the other benefits and other goods that emerge out of it disappear as well. So this is an argument about commerce and the trade of commerce. Chapter 21 of Commerce by the Nobility, the commerce by the nobility of a monarch, in a monarchy, by the nobility in the monarchy, right? Chapter 21. That it's bad enough to be a prince, right? In other words, it is against the spirit of commerce for the nobility to engage in it in a monarchy, okay? That would be pernicious for towns, says the Emperor Honorius and Theodotus, and it would take away the ease in which merchants and plebeians buy and sell. It is against the spirit of monarchy for the nobility to engage in commerce. The usage that permitted commerce to nobility of England is one of the things that most contributed to the weakness of monarchical government there. Right? And the argument is that England is not a strong monarchical government; it's more a commercial republic. Right? This is the argument. Some people argue with a monarchy. In fact, even this has been the recent arguments of David Starkey in his YouTube discussions. Chapter 22 on a particular reflection. People who are struck by what is practiced in some states think there should be laws in France engaging the nobles to carry on commerce. In other words, the idea that the nobles should be carrying on commerce. This would be the way to destroy the nobility without bringing any utility to commerce. Was it destroy the nobility and not bring anything? Those who want there to be laws to force the nobility to engage in commerce, this would not good. It would destroy the nobility and it would not bring utility to commerce. The practice of this country is very wise. Traders are not nobles, but they may become nobles. They can have the expectation of becoming nobles without the drawbacks of being nobles. They have no surer way of quitting their profession than to do it well or to do it successfully. Some things usually linked to prosperity. The laws ordering each man to stay in his profession and to pass it down to his children are and can be useful only in despotic states, where none can or should be rivals. So there's no rivalry, no competition. That therefore, or laws that saying you can only do this, you can only be at this and this and this. Castes can only be and stuck in professions. That your son can only be this. This is despotic states. Let it not be said that each man will follow his profession better when he cannot leave it for another. Let's not say this is a despotic thing. I say that a profession will be better pursued when those who have excelled in it can expect to gain another benefit, another utility, another profession. Okay? You need to go do it. In other words, you can't this idea, and this is against the argument about letting the successful traders become nobility. When nobility can be acquired with silver, it greatly encourages a trader to put themselves in a position to gain it. I am not examining whether it is good thus to give the prize of virtue to wealth, the prizes of virtue to wealth. There are governments in which this can be quite useful. In other words, I'm not examining whether it's good to give this, but there are governments that this is useful. In France, the estate that of the robe lying between the great nobility and those of the people, which, without having the brilliance of the former, has all its privileges. That estate which leave individuals at mid-level, while the body, the depository of the laws, is glorified. The estate in which one has no way to distinguish oneself but by prosperity and virtue, an honor profession, but one which always lets a more distinguished one be seen. That altogether, that altogether warlike nobility, who thinks that whatever degree of wealth one has, one fortune is yet to be made, but that it is shameful to increase one's good if one does not begin by dissipating them. That is the part of the nation who always serves with their capital goods. This is the warlike. They give it, who, when they are ruined, give their place to others who will serve with their capital gain again. Who go to war so that no one will dare to say they did not go. They will go to war so that no one will dare say they did not go. Honor. Who expects honor when they cannot expect wealth? They can't get wealth. And when they do not get wealth, they console themselves because they have acquired honor. All these things all these things have necessarily contributed to the greatness of the kingdom. This is France, right? And if over the past 3 centuries the kingdom has endlessly increased its power, it must be attributed to the goodness of its laws, not to fortune, which does not have this sort of consistency. Fortune is not consistent. Fortune is not a consistent thing. It's not fortune. It's not luck. It is that their laws have done it. And this idea that the nobility is what you become this, and they become the nobility. Whatever the nobility, you are now expected to do service, to do good things. You sacrifice your wealth. You do sacrifices. You do this, but you get honor. Now, this is a danger of when you get the people that we've allowed our political leaders to get wealth from their service. Half members of Congress in America become millionaires after their time in office. They get their wealth, not honor. See, this is the danger of what's happening. We don't, and therefore this is the corruption of the political system. This is why maybe the aristocratic argument is a better argument than honor and blessing. But remember that you need wealth. You need to generate wealth. You need to have this. And this is the old public service attitude. Therefore, you had to be wealthy people to do it. The wealthy people who had wealth already. If you allow poor people to become office holders, they're going to what? Use their office to make themselves wealthy. So that is the danger of allowing the poor access to the political offices. They will use it to aggrandize themselves. And therefore that corrupts the order. The argument is this is the aristocrat, that the wealthy that have their wealth already and then become, by entering public life, surrender their public service. That's the older idea, and that's the idea that's kind of lost its flavor in that sense in modern times. Chapter 23. Those nations for which it is disadvantageous to engage in commerce. Right. This is the nations where it's disadvantageous to engage in commerce. Wealth consists in land or movable effects. The land of each country is usually possessed by its inhabitants. Most states have laws that discourage foreigners from acquiring their land. Only the presence of the master can increase their, only the presence of the master can increase their value. Therefore, this kind of wealth belongs to each state particularly. So land like this, but immovable. Land is immovable in that sense. But movable effects, such as silver, notes, letters of exchange, shares in companies, ships, and all commodities, belong to the whole world, which in this regard comprises but a single state, of which all societies are members. In other words, this is where he says that this is the nature of the market, the global state. In other words, all the things that are movable things can go anywhere. Okay, and it's the whole world of societies of state. That every state is a member. That a single state is of which is which all our societies are members. The people that possess the most of such movable effects in the universe are the richest. Some states have an immense number of them. They acquire them by their produce, by their labor of their workers, by their industry, by their discoveries, even by chance. The avarice of nations dispute the movable. The avarice of nation disputes the movables of the whole universe. There may be a state so unhappy that it will be deprived of the movable effects of other countries, and also even of almost all of its own. The owners of its land will be but the colonists of foreigners. This state will lack everything uh, and will be able to acquire nothing. It would be far better for it to have commerce with no nation in the world. In these circumstances, commerce has led to poverty. They own nothing. They have nothing. This is maybe the argument. This is the argument of that in this commerce, if they have nothing, they have no access, and that the movables don't even belong to them, and all the movables go out. They have nothing. And even their land doesn't belong to them. They're just what the commerce is. It better be to have no commerce than have this. In these circumstances, commerce has led to poverty. A country which always sends out fewer commodities or less produce than it receives puts itself in equilibrium of impoverishing itself. It will receive ever less until extreme poverty it receives nothing. In commercial countries, silver that has suddenly vanished comes back because the state that received it owes it. In the states which we speak, silver never comes back because those who have taken it owe nothing. Poland will serve as our example. This Poland of the early First Republic. It has almost none of these things which we call movable effects of the universe, except the grain of its field. A few lords possess the whole province. They oppress the plowman in order to have a great quality of grain to sell to foreigner, to produce for themselves the things that their luxury demands. If Poland had commerce with no nation, its people would be happier. If its important men who would have only their grain, would give it to their peasants for them to live on. Excessively large domains would be burdened to them. They would divide them among their peasants, and everyone would have skins or wools from their herds. There would no longer be the immense expense of making clothes. The important men who always love luxury, who would be able to find it only in their country, would encourage the poor to work. I say this nation would flourish more unless it becomes barbarous, something that the laws could prevent. So the Polish example here is, again, this is very much echoing what Rousseau in his Constitution of Poland would say to some degree at this time, that the commerce of the time didn't produce excess. It wasn't movable to make this. And the real commerce only benefited the wealthy at the expense of everyone else. And that's the danger of that situation. This is the danger of that situation. Let us consider Japan. An excessive quantity of what it can accept produces the excess of what it can send out. Things will be in equilibrium as if imports and exports are moderate. And besides, this kind of inflation will produce 1,000 advantages for the states. There will be more consumption, more things on which the arts can be exercised, more men employed, more means of acquiring power. So therefore, this idea of the more trade, the more expensive. In other words, like this, in cases in which one needs prompt aid, a state that is so filled can give it more quickly than another. It is hard when a country that does not have superfluous things, but it is the nature of commerce to make things superfluous, to make superfluous things useful, and useful ones necessary. So therefore, in other words, superfluous things can make industry, make things do trade. In other words, more men employed, more men and things like this superfluous. So that's kind of good at one sense. It's hard when a country does not have superfluous things, but it is the nature of commerce to make superfluous things useful and to make useful ones necessary. Therefore, the state will be able to give the necessary things to the greatest number of subjects. Let us say, therefore, that it is not nations who need nothing that lose by carrying on commerce. It is not nations that it is not nations who need nothing that lose by carrying on commerce. It is those who need everything. It is not peoples who have enough among themselves, but those who have nothing at home who finds it advantageous to trade with no one. So that's Montesquieu's point, is that the ones who can get no benefit from commerce, that they have nothing, they have no assets, and that the commerce does not lead us to any benefit in this sense, only the loss of their ability to feed themselves or the means to do this. This is the people who have nothing to gain from commerce. Those who have nothing to gain, those who have superfluous, they gain. Those with nothing don't gain. And isn't it that this is maybe a very much interesting? Although he's defending commerce, there's a critique of commerce here. You can see the beginnings of Rousseau's critique of commerce here in these passages. Okay, this is the end of this chapter. I will stop here. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and when I see them, I will respond to them. If you liked it, like it. Share with a friend, share on social media. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. You can grow the channel some. Encourage others to subscribe. Another thing is, if you have not, if you didn't like it, say thumb down, but then say why, what is wrong in the comments, so we can learn. We can always learn from things, but maybe there's something wrong. And the next thing I'm to do is now, you can see the plant in the background. My wife insisted I have a plant here. I don't know why. I think it's trying to, for bugs, she says. Who knows? If you want to follow me on social media and things like this, you can follow me below there. The links are below. If you want to help me to do these things, that you want to contribute, you can do so financially. Contribute. You can subscribe to our Patreon, or you can buy one of my books that again listed below. These posts again post Mondays and Wednesdays. Next time we'll look at chapter 21. In fact, we have to remember this is the book. Part 4 has 4 books, so we're at the halfway point. We'll turn next time. So therefore, that's it. Well, have a good day. Take care, and see you again. Bye bye later. Bye bye.